So we're going to be talking about making the case for striking cartels and narco traffickers across the globe and talk to you a little bit about the preparations that the US government is making to actually do that, to actually go kinetic on Mexican drug cartels, Colombian drug cartels, Venezuelan drug cartels, and anybody else that gets in the way. Why should America treat cartels as enemy terrorist forces? Let's call it what it is. Transnational narco trafficking organizations, if you want to call them that, are not just criminal syndicates. They're foreign, armed, revenue rich, networked organizations that are killing Americans at scale. So the body count can't be understated. Now, overdose deaths went down pretty sharply last year over the year before, almost 27%. But that's it dropping from 110,000 to 80,000 in a year is still 80,000 dead Americans. In the last 4 years, we've had more Americans than that die in the United States from drug overdoses. We could stop right there. That is all the proof we need that the cartels need to be treated like warring parties. Okay. They are a national security threat. Now, fentanyl is the number one driver so far of these overdose deaths, and this mostly comes in via Mexico. The DEA reports attribute most illicitly manufactured fentanyl smuggled into the US to cartel productions in Mexico. And they use precursor chemicals that they got mostly from China and actually to a lesser extent India. Now, the seizures on the US southern border illustrate the scale and momentum of this problem. The CBP last year seized 27,000 pounds of fentanyl. That's a modern record. Nearly 22,000 pounds in 2024. That is industrial scale trafficking. That's not street corner crime or anything like that. And the lethality of these drugs is off the charts. DEA's lab testing has found that 6 of 10 fentanyl laced fake pills carry a potentially lethal dose. 60%. We have police officers that died just from getting a whiff of some of this stuff that they pick up. This is deliberate mass poisoning for profit. Now, cartel distribution is national, it's all over the country. The cartels are not just operating in Mexico or in Colombia, they are operating in every state in the US. And these are not mere gangs, they're paramilitary actors. You look at what happens in Mexico, the tactics and weaponry that the CJNG and rival groups are using. They've got armored convoys, belt-fed machine guns, 50 caliber machine guns. They're weaponizing drones. They're setting up IEDs. There've been hundreds of drone attacks documented by Mexico's defense ministry in just the first half of 2024. So this is beyond an insurgency. These guys are not just gangs living in Mexico. They are owning parts of Mexico. They are holding territory in Mexico. So the cartels have been engaging, again, not just in the incredible amount of brutal violence south of the border, but they've also been engaging in intimidation and attacks on U.S. interests. The U.S. consulate in Nuevo Laredo has repeatedly had to lock down because there were gunfights out in front of the consulate. And they've even had direct fire incidents. Cartels kidnapped 4 Americans in Matamoros in 2023 and killed 2 of those guys. Back in 2011, Los Zetas gunmen murdered Jaime Zapata, who was an ICE special agent that was working undercover in Mexico on official duty. Those aren't local crimes. These are attacks on U.S. nationals and facilities. And up till this point, very little has been done to take direct action against them. So we can't overlook the strategic destabilization that's going on right next door any longer. Mexico has had hundreds of thousands of homicides since 2006. Over 110,000 people have been disappeared. Violence is ramping up almost every week. So cartel business is a national level warfare against the United States on the cheap. And it's being encouraged by countries like Russia and China. Not just encouraged, but facilitated, because that instability on our southern border makes it easier for terror groups like Hezbollah and Hamas and Iran to get agents into the United States. The US retail drug market is routinely estimated in the hundreds of billions of dollars. And if the supply dried up, the demand would dry up too. The demand's not going to just continue to grow if there's less drugs available. So we need to do something about this. And like I said, we have far more than that dying, orders of magnitude more every year in the United States from illicit drugs, from drug overdoses. And this is coming from, is being financed and enabled by foreign countries. So you've got money brokers that feed cartel production. They launder the proceeds, often with gold. And so you have a transnational terror ecosystem that is murdering Americans at scale. So what's being done about it now? February 20th of this year, the State Department designated the Sinaloa Cartel, CJNG, Gulf Cartel, Cartel de Este, La Nueva Familia Michoacana, Carteles Unidos, and others as foreign terrorist organizations. They also designated the Cartel de los Soles in Venezuela, which is made up of government officials and military officers that are very heavily involved in the cocaine trafficking that comes from Colombia into Venezuela and then onto the United States. Matter of fact, I have another map here that shows how that works. You can see here how Venezuela is not just sending drugs to the United States, they're sending it to Europe as well, to West Africa. And so designating these guys as foreign terrorist organizations allows the US to unlock authority to do certain things that they didn't have before. So, like to go after people who finance, who launder the money, anybody in the United States that's working with these cartels in any capacity, they can get arrested, they can get sanctioned, they can get their accounts frozen, all because of this FTO designation under Title 8 USC. There was also a use of force authority that 2025 House Joint Resolution 81 authorizes military force against certain Mexican cartels. It's a recognition that law enforcement only tools are not matched to this threat. So that use of force authority, House Resolution 81, is essentially a declaration of war against the Mexican cartels, at least. Now, under international law, military action outside the United States territory requires host nation consent or a valid rationale for self-defense under the Article 51 of the UN Charter. Now, what I have just laid out to you is exactly that valid self-defense rationale. The US doesn't necessarily need to alert the Mexican authorities before we go in and start dropping bombs on bad guys if we decide to do that. Now, so far, we have attempted to work within the system and work with the Mexican government, which is as corrupt as the cartels themselves. We have U.S. Special Operations troops in Mexico right now working with Mexican Marines to take out cartels. We've got lots and lots of drones and surveillance aircraft that are flying around over Mexico and over Venezuela and other places in the Caribbean to try to find these guys. And so we're seeing an increase in the amount of intelligence collection that's taking place across Latin America by the United States. Now, what are they doing with all of that? I want to show you a little bit about what might happen if the Trump administration gives the Pentagon the go-ahead to actually start taking kinetic action against cartels across the Western Hemisphere. Pretty well versed in how this works, but there's a lot that goes into, it's not just, okay, go find cartel guys and kill them. There's a tremendous amount of planning that goes into this. And there's an actual, they call it a kill chain that the US military, it's a continuum that they engage in. And it goes like this. Okay, so let's take a look here. This is the continuum the US military uses. It's called find, fix, finish, exploit, and analyze. I'm going to go through each one of those and help you understand how these work. So the US military gets the order. That's step one. The order comes down. Somebody at a higher level, that could be the president, it could be a combatant commander, whatever. They decide we want this bad guy to go away, or we want this group to cease to function. And they give the order to pass that on to the intelligence and operations community, find this guy, track him, and get the trigger pullers lined up. So we are now sending drones, satellites, these aircraft like the KC-46 or the E-7 aircraft. We're trying to hire informants on the ground, undercover people going in and trying to find human intelligence. The goal is to figure out where the target lives and what is his pattern of life. Where does he sleep? Where does he drive? Where does he hide? Where does he meet with his team? Do it in real time with cameras in the sky, and you have the ability to hack their phone, that kind of thing. Now, the MQ-9 Reapers are dual role aircraft. This is a U.S. soldier. Why Reapers, what Reapers are capable of, and why they work so well for this mission.
So my name is Master Sergeant Thomas Anderson out of the 174th. I'm an FTD instructor for weapons. I instruct on the MQ-9 aircraft right now. This is basically the newest iteration of the drone program. A lot of things are going to this. No threat to the pilot, high endurance, it can stay in the air a long time. It's a very fuel efficient aircraft, so with a full load of fuel, it can stay up for 20, 21 hours. And the nice thing with the pilots being in a GCS on the ground, they can just swap out as needed, so you don't have to worry about fatigue. Main missions are ISR. They can do attack missions as well. It has a ground mapping radar in there, and they can do a lot of different things with that. It can target moving targets. And with that, we call it over the horizon. Obviously, the pilot can be here or in Pennsylvania and fly anywhere in the world. It has 4 stations that are weaponized. It has a total of 6 stations on the wings, but it does have 4 weapon stations. You can tell they're putting a lot of resources into making it better. It's getting easier, a lot more capabilities.
So these things are extremely capable. They don't use the Predator drones anymore. They quit using those a few years ago. The Reaper, they've got a couple of hundred of those in the U.S. inventory at any given time, and they can fly pretty much anywhere on planet Earth. And they are flown from like Elmendorf Air Base, or they're flown Air Force Base in Nevada, places like that. So they can stay aloft for up to 30 hours. And so you put one of those things up, they've got a very advanced suite of cameras and optics, thermal imaging, and all sorts of things. And so they go fly over areas of known cartel activity and start to identify, oh, there's a convoy of vehicles. Normally, civilians don't travel in convoys. So let's follow that and see where it's going. Looks like a lot of activity around this jungle area that doesn't really have any industry or anything, but there's a lot of trucks coming up and leaving at various times to this little jungle site. And it's really hot down there because of these processing of fentanyl and these different drugs. It creates a lot of heat. So thermal signatures, things like that. And that's how they find the targets. The real workhorse in this is something like the MQ-9. They have to pin them down in space and time, right here, right now. So they use what's called ISR. This is intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. ISR is done mainly by drones. So they are fixing the people that are heading up these organizations, finding out where they are right now. And then they're going to cross-check that. And they're going to make sure that's the guy. That's called positive identification, or PID, P-I-D. Then you pass it on, once PID is established, to the operators. And the operators are tasked with finishing the target. So find, fix, finish. As they finish the target, they could do it with an airstrike. A Reaper could launch a Hellfire missile or one of those small diameter bombs that he was talking about in that piece. Or maybe a fighter jet, an F-15, drops a GBU-39 on the guy if it's a bigger target, something like that. We could theoretically send in a gunship. That might be a little overkill for strikes in Mexico. The problem with those things is that they fly relatively low and slow and could be shot down. The cartels are very heavily armed, and they've been known to shoot down Mexican aircraft in the past. They've shot down helicopters more than once. So they might not want to send an AC-130 Juliet model in there, but they could. It's possible. other options, if let's say they want to take the guy alive, they might send in Delta Force or the Navy SEALs to hit the house at night and grab the guy. But in all cases, there's going to be a stack of aircraft. There's going to be a drone that's watching. There's going to be a jet or another drone with firepower, maybe a gunship on call in case things go bad, and a refueling tanker, CH-46, C-46 in the background, ready to refuel all those other aircraft. We have to have a quick reaction force on call in case one of those aircraft that's piloted gets shot down and we've got to go in and rescue a pilot. So once they do make a raid, let's say that they do decide they want to take somebody alive, they're going to send in the special forces. If they go in something like that, they're going to be bagging laptops, phones, papers, any kind of intelligence they can, because that is exactly what they will use for the next strike and the one after that. If it's a drone strike, another drone might go in to scoop up what's left. They might send in some local Mexican forces to pick up hard drives, IDs, take biometric samples. Every bit of that material that's picked up goes back into that find, fix, finish cycle to map the next target. Once they get that intelligence, then they have to go into the analyze phase. They're going to learn and refine and prepare for the next target. All of that feeds back into the cycle. The kill chain is not just one and done. It is a continuous cycle that puts pressure on these networks, dismantles them node by node. So this helps the United States make their strikes count. They are precise, they're repeatable. We're not just going to go in carpet bomb an area. This is hunting in its most complex form. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of people involved in every mission from the planning phase to the execution. And then they finish the job with the minimum amount of force needed so that they can minimize civilian casualties and collateral damage. Let's go to the map real quick because I want to talk about one of the places that might get targeted as we wrap this up. This red dot you see here on the map of Mexico represents a port called Manzanillo. And this is one of the main ports where drugs come in and then get shipped cross country over land to the north. Okay, this is in Jalisco state of Mexico. There's the port right there. You can see some ships, some containers, things like that. This whole town is essentially owned by the cartel, and nothing comes in or out without them knowing about it and approving it. The federal government of Mexico has very little presence in this area. And so from there, it's a straight shot north up to the U.S. southern border. They can reach Brownsville, Texas. They can reach Nogales, Tijuana, El Paso, you name it. Any place on the U.S. southern border from there. But so if we are going to see kinetic strikes against the cartels, that's one place where we could do it. The U.S. could start dropping bombs on this port down here or on some of the ships coming and going. So there's no shortage of targets, but I want to say don't be surprised if there are kinetic strikes if they're not all in Mexico. It wouldn't surprise me to see the first strikes taking place in Venezuela. And as I mentioned last night, the Venezuelan government under Nicolas Maduro says that they're preparing for war. They believe that there will be war between the United States and Venezuela. What that shows is that this issue is not just a national security issue for the United States. This is a global security issue. And if the United States does give the go-ahead to our military to strike at the cartels, we will be doing the entire planet a favor.